Monitor, Professor Mary de Haas, to talk to us. Prof. de Haas, thank you for your time as always. We really do appreciate it. Before we get into these marches and what you make of them and just some of the sentiments expressed by ordinary South Africans, I'd like to invite you to reflect on the appointment now of the new acting police commissioner, and this is Professor Feroz Kachalia. Your thoughts?
Look, I think it's a good choice. It's better than having yet another politician because he's a law professor. And I think that's, we've had it, I think, in the early days of the Mandela government. We once had a businessman, I think, briefly running the police. So I'd rather have a law professor than a business person running the police. So it's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
All right, and it's all about, I mean, and you've spoken about it before, others have as well, rebuilding the trust deficit that exists between, when engulfs the communities when it comes to how they perceive the SAPS and other arms of enforcement in the state. Let's reflect on what we're seeing this morning, Mary, and these are the multiple protests, or some of these protests are separate, and some of them are just pieces of the same protest. But we see people out on the streets, our reporters are there talking to the local community, and they're quite passionate about Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi and supporting him. You've been covering political violence, patterns of violence in the province for years, and you know the story, the pain of local communities when they feel that they are not being well represented or even assisted by police. Just your thoughts on people coming out today to throw their support behind the Provincial Police Commissioner.
Look, I don't know what the motives are. You must remember two things. One thing, anyway, well, first of all, he's touched a raw nerve when he says he's fighting crime, so people will support him. You know, in South Africa, people tend to believe what people say without testing the evidence. He has made allegations which are very serious and are going to be investigated, I hope, by this commission. It's just an inquiry, basically. It's not a full-scale judicial commission. Looking at the evidence of both sides, because in terms of the allegations Mkhwanazi's made, they're counter-allegations coming from within senior experienced police about Mkhwanazi himself, which I won't even go into. And all of these, but they go right back to his relationship with Clearly during the time of the World Cup tender in 2010. For which Clearly should have been charged. So I don't know why Mkhwanazi wasn't shouting about Clearly breaking the law, but never mind. He was I guess he was just having to accept what the minister clearly said. That's the first thing. The second thing is that having touched this raw nerve, it's a very partial community reaction. I found a whole lot of stuff in my mailbox this week about, we've been trying to deal with these criminals in our area. They're working with law enforcement people and no one will do anything. You know, if you look back to July 21, do you remember what happened? A senior government minister said to me, we can't find Mkhwanazi. He's the provincial commissioner. We know he had leave, but his phone is off. The province was being looted and burning. The provincial commissioner was not even in the province. So, you know, there are those sorts of problems too, because the phones don't work at a lot of police stations. I have had this experience. The emails bounce back. Some of the police stations are decrepit. There's no petrol. The vehicles aren't maintained. This is what police management is about. It's not about they're out there making claims that they're helping the community without making sure that community members can get hold of them.
I want to go into, let's just tease apart some of the threads that you're putting together in that tapestry of a response, Mary de Haas. The one is, and I think what you're alluding to, or well, you're not alluding to it, you're saying it quite directly, is that people in this time feel as if they need a hero. They need somebody who they feel is actively on their side. This is the moment then for Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, who following that news conference, or even before, in the way that he'd been tackling crime and the rooting out of suspects. We've seen those clashes between police and suspects wanted in connection with a range of different crimes, that this happens to be the man of the moment. And what you're inviting people is to not, or is cautioning them not to do that, is not to either sanctify or vilify individuals until the facts are made plain. Have I encapsulated that correctly?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Use this. The evidence must go to the Constitutional Court judge and the people who are assisting him, senior advocates. I don't have a problem if people want to support Mkhwanazi, but what I'm saying to you is that it's only one side. There's another whole side to this that you don't hear about. So, yeah, I mean, I don't believe in marches myself. I'm not a fan of them. People with evidence must go to this inquiry. It's basically a judicial inquiry that's been set up. And, I mean, the evidence must be evaluated. They must have access. This inquiry, to be effective, must have access to all the information Mkhwanazi has and all the information to counter his allegations about this task team, which are nonsense, because that task team has achieved virtually nothing in terms of political violence, in terms of political convictions. And I mean, you can forget about those statistics. There's never any breakdowns. And it's cost us a small fortune. They don't want to give those privileges up. They stay at the Oyster Box Hotel. What sort of policing is that? With taxpayers' money, millions of it. That's why they don't want the task team to go.
Let's go into that.
The prosecution.
Prof, just for a second, because I want us to break that down. As you say, again, in the aftermath of what we heard last Sunday, the disbanding of the political killings task team, the precipice on which the police stood, we heard from Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, of imminent arrests and so on, you know, telling the story of how effective that unit was, and then was disbanded because it was ostensibly going after people that were politically connected. You're sharing a different perspective on the effectiveness of that, and trying to, I guess, mitigate the call for that unit to be reinstituted. So take us back into your assessment on its impact and how much the price tag is that was associated with keeping it alive.
Oh, there's figures. I don't have them to hand. They're millions of rand. Because what happened is they got extra deployment money. You would have dozens and dozens of police coming and going, not even detectives, some of them. You'd have the NIU. I've never heard of the NIU running around with detectives before, getting an extra deployment money. The NIU running around, well, people are invading land at Camperdown, which is under interdict and holding people up with rifles. Construction mafias. This is the job of the NIU, not running around. I've got affidavits about the bribery. They're dealing, I mean, you must forget about this deployment to Gauteng, because it has nothing to do with the mandate of the task team. It is the mandate of the Hawks, the DPCI, to investigate, same as Nongoma, same as the arrest of those lawyers, forensic lawyers. Nothing to do with political killings. It's the mandate of the Hawks to do municipal investigations, not a sergeant from the stock theft in the Midlands who knows nothing about organised crime. And you have a South African police criminal arm as well to investigate some of the minor stuff. But the Hawks do the corruption and the syndicates, not the task team. I mean, this is I've put so much out. It's all with Parliament, it's with ministers, and I don't know why no one's paying attention, because it's evidence from case studies. And it's the mandate of the task team when it was set up, following the Morani Commission, to investigate political killings. Yeah. But it's not just the police in this, it's the prosecution. That's the problem. The bigger problem is the prosecution.
Mary, you know, again, you know, I'm, and I'm sorry to stutter, but I'm trying to connect back to the interview that one of our journalists just had with one of the local marchers from a particular ward in Durban, who, her name is Jenny, expressed so passionately why she is supporting Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, and in fact others. You can multiply that story by hundreds of people who see him as someone who is doing something. What would your advice be to community members who really want to feel like they have some power, like they are empowered and not disempowered by, you know, case dockets being lost, cases not investigated, corruption in the police? How would you redirect this energy that you're seeing then, which you believe is misplaced, you know, in Mkhwanazi?
Look, I've spoken, I've written about this ad nauseum over the years. I've told communities. I mean, why do I get so many people coming to me and telling me about their problems with the police, and that the police are colluding with people who beat their wives, the police lead? I've been saying this for years, and I've also said that it starts with crime intelligence, and this is what's been ruined for the last 2 years. There's been no money. I've heard this directly. You know, people saying we don't even have money to pay informants because it's been looted, and that's why Khumalo and Mkhwanazi and Masemola are all operational response people. They go back to the 90s, so they stand up for each other, right? And according to the Sunday Times on Sunday, there was a release to say that both Masemola and Mkhwanazi are under investigation by the ID. So we have to leave that the investigative directorate. So maybe those are just more allegations. I can't evaluate, but I have a stack of stuff on the political killings task team. But you're right. I mean, Mkhwanazi has touched a raw nerve in saying he's fighting crime, but I think one of the biggest casualties here in this whole thing is our constitution, because people think it's fighting crime to kill gangsters. We don't know if they're gangsters. We have only the word of the police. Maybe they're the gangsters that are colluding with police, because what I get from Nhlanhla, KwaMashu, Umlazi, for example, is factions, that there are people in the police that work with gangsters distributing drugs. So how do we know which gangsters are being killed? Because we are not following the constitution. And I must tell you one other thing. Last week, there was a report in the New York Times, and imagine the publicity for South Africa about this, that the police are still tubing people, that they're torturing people. Well, I've been fighting this for years, been exposing it. We can't get anything done about it. Mkhwanazi is defending a task team that part of its modus operandi is using plastic bags to force people to make false statements. So there are two sides to this, but I understand, I want to make it clear, I understand the community support for Mkhwanazi because he's coming across, but the problem is, I mean, it happens across the board. You hear politicians saying things and people getting hopeful, and nothing happens. You know, this must be translated into action. I send Mkhwanazi, you know, he started off, I was very encouraged by him. He started off receptive, acting. I send him stuff now. I get no response about crime. I get no response about, for example, a woman who's given a lift in an Uber and sexually harassed, and the police close the docket. The father comes to me and I say to him, I've written to the police, they do nothing. You try, Mkhwanazi. He doesn't even reply to me. My last email's bounced back. And I'm reporting crime to him. I'm reporting problems in areas that need his oversight, and I'm getting nowhere. So, yeah, I mean, there are different perspectives on this, and I want to see the evidence examined, because it's very important that the allegations he's made, and I'm not saying this, the Court is saying it. They're saying, we want the evidence. And I want the evidence from the people who are sitting in prison falsely charged to cover for politicians by the political task team. But at the same time, I'm still helping community members who come to me and say the police aren't acting. I wish more people would. And I've said to people, point the right people to your community police forums. Get respected professionals. Don't leave it to politicians. Hold police accountable in your community.
Professor Mary de Haas, thank you for sharing your reflections and inviting communities who are in this moment of protest and support to temper that. As she says, the story seems to be more complex than is presented or than is what people are thinking.